Okay, so thank you. The projector doesn't really like my computer, so it's a little bit yellow, but it's going to be fine. Okay, so I'll be talking about spatial data versioning. I'm sure they probably have heard about this idea of versioning, of having same data that changes over time. And this is something that is commonly used for text data. Of course, it's used by programmers. If you are programmers, you will know about that. But it's something that is not so common when we're talking about spatial data. And that's what we're trying to solve at Boundless with this application that we wrote, GeoGig, and this is what I'm going to talk about. And then I will describe a plugin for using that from QGIS, right? Okay, so we started this at Boundless as a research and development project. That means that there was not actually a client that was demanding us to do that. But we thought it was a good idea, so we started writing that to solve this, this need. Now we are under this location tech organization, which is somehow similar to what Jeff talked here. Like OSGeo, this location tech is another organization that acts as an umbrella for several projects, and GeoGig is now one of these projects, right? So what we do is distributed version control, right? Version control, you get the idea, I guess. It's just, keeping track of all the versions of some data. And the idea of distributed means that there are several computers doing the same thing, several machines versioning the data, and all of them, they have all the history of the data. That's one model. Instead of having one centralized repository where we have all the data, we have several different machines, and each of them can work with all the data, right? It's similar to Git. I don't know how many people is familiar with Git in here. Just raise your hand. Okay, so quite a few people, right? So it's similar to Git. But instead of working on text, it works on features, right? On geospatial data features. So basically the idea is the same. You create versions, but it's better prepared than, probably if you know Git, you know GitHub, and you know that in GitHub you can add GeoJSON files, and it versions that, but that's pretty limited if you have used that, for big files or for doing other things. So the idea is to have something that is specifically designed for features instead of text. So as I said, we are part of Location Tech. It's much better now. Okay, and we're in this group of projects in Location Tech. We haven't finished actually becoming a full Location Tech project because we have some problems with, legal problems with the dependencies, but more or less we're on our way to do that, right? So the question is, why am I saying that it is important to version your data? Because, well, we've been working with data all the time, and probably you have never used any version control. But probably you know this situation that you have some file and you do some changes, and whether you overwrite the previous file, that means you lose your old data, or you create a new file, and then you have 100 files with the same thing, or 100 tables in a database. It's like my roads 2, my roads new, my roads corrected, and you have a mess of files in there, or you don't have the history of that, right? And it's very interesting to have the history of the maps because, data changes. And I want to know how was this map or how was this roads layer 1 month ago, who created that, etc., right? Or do analysis, how it evolved over time. And if you do that, just keeping several separate tables in a database or several files, that's a mess, right? That's not something that you can work with. So basically the idea of Git is capturing all this history of all the changes, all the edits that we made, right? Also, something that is useful is to try different scenarios. Like I have my data, my roads, and I say, okay, I want to do an analysis. What happens if I build a new road in here? Or what happens if I build that road in a different place? That means I create new data to do this virtual scenarios, right? If I can have that in my database, correctly organized in GeoGig, I just create that data, do the analysis, just like, oh, this doesn't work. It's not a good idea to build my road in here. I go back to the normal data, right? So this kind of things is very useful to try out all kind of things, right? So the ideas are very simple. One, we have the spatial data. Those are the files and databases, the normal data that you have. But then we have the idea of the repository database. That's another database. It's a normal database actually, but with a particular structure. And that's where we keep all the history. So it keeps the data, but also the changes, how it has evolved, who has changed the data, etc. And this is in your computer, right? In my computer, I have all the history. That means all the versions of that data since it was first created until now, right? But then there are remote repos. That's like someone else has the same data and works on that data, right? And the good thing is that between your local machine and that remote repository, you can change data, okay? You can share the data, move it from one place to another, etc. For those of you familiar with Git, that's a common idea. So what do we have in GeoGig? We have a command line interface that like Git, you use it in the console. That's powerful, but it's not for every user, And when we work with spatial data, it's a quite graphic thing, right? So having a user interface would be really good, and that's why we created a QGIS extension, the plugin, which is what I'm going to show you. And also we have a GeoServer extension. That means that you have all your all your GeoGig data, and then you put GeoServer in front of it, and you create WMS, WFS services based on that data that is in GeoGig. And if you have a transactional WFS, like a WFST, when you edit the data, that creates a new version in the database. So we have integration with QGIS and with GeoServer. Okay, so well, basically what I was saying before, right? This thing about keeping all the changes, right? I can change my data, see how it has changed, and if the change that I did was not right, I can go back always to any version. Like I can say, I want to see how was this data 1 year ago. And I can go to there easily and do all the changes because I have the full history. I keep all the different versions first time, right? I also keep the pedigree of the data, so it's like I can track like who changed that. If I see that, oh, there's this road in here that it doesn't seem to be correct, like who has added that road? I can go back and say like, this guy has done this edit at that time. I was like, that's not correct, right? So I can revert that and say like, no, the work that this guy did is not correct. I don't trust him, so let's revert that change. And I go back to the version previous to that change, right? So that's super useful. That's something that you can do as well. So the way we work is that we edit things and then we put it into the database. Like we edit things. You don't need to be online. You have all the data in your computer. This is what I'm going to do in the demo, actually. So you do the changes in your computer, in your normal data, your shape files, in your PostGIS tables, etc. And then that goes to the repo and creates a new version, all locally, right? You do that with your, computer or your mobile phone, and that goes into the repo, which is this database with a particular structure. And then you can replicate. It's called cloning. You just clone the repo. You create another repo exactly the same, and you can put that in another machine, right, with the data, and someone else can work and keep on adding new versions, right? But that also can go in the other direction. If any of these copies adds new data, I can pull that data and put it into my computer. So by doing that, I just share my data between all the people working on the same data set. And you can imagine like OpenStreetMap, right? You have this idea, some people add, right? And then of course you can put all that together in a more complex workflow, and then there's people working on the data and other people using the data actually. So that's basically the idea. You can see that as it works in OpenStreetMap, but with some advantages because actually it's very easy to keep track, to go back to the changes, etc., right? So if I'm not wrong, okay. This is the addresses where you can download and test. It's of course free software. You can test it, both GeoGig itself, the workshops, and both the QGIS plugin. And I'm going to do a small demo so you can see it, how it works. Okay, so I have QGIS in here, right? And this is everything you need. A normal QGIS. You add the plugin, which is also free software, right? And what I'm going to do is just to do some edits so you can get the idea of how this works, right? So I have just normal layers in there, just 2 layers with rivers, and the plugin adds this menu in here, and I have the GeoGig Navigator, which is an explorer over my repos, right? So this is my list of repos. I don't have any repository, so no database with history. I'm going to create one. This is in here. Okay, so that's it. I have created one database. It's like, I'm going to put my data from the conference in there, right? So I just can start putting layers in there, right? So if I click in here, I'll see that I have no history. That means I have no steps in here. I don't have any version. This is the master branch. The idea of branch, for those of you familiar with Git, sounds familiar, right? So I'm going to add data, and this is pretty simple. I just add a layer to a repo. So any layer that I can put into QGIS, I can just put it into my repo, right? So that's what this works, right? And for each version, I have to describe the version. This is my first version. So now you see the history of the repo now has one step. That means that I have one version. It's just one single one. And what I'm going to do now is to just close this. You know, this is used to manage my repos. I don't need to manage the repo anymore. My layer is into the repo, and QGIS and the plugin, the GeoGig plugin knows that this layer is trapped. That means that I'm going to do some edits, and I want the GeoGig plugin to follow those edits and create new versions, right? So now I'd say let's do like something like that, for instance. Going to be editing the layer, right? So let's select something simple. I can't remember. It doesn't let me edit or what? Okay, so some stupid change. Imagine that I have corrected the track of a river, or whatever layer you have. I can edit the attributes. Any edit that you do on the layer, you use the normal QGIS tools, right? I'm not using anything from the plugin itself, just normal QGIS edit. So now what happens is that this is originally a shapefile, so it writes the changes back to the shapefile, but it says, oh, this layer is into GeoGig. So I have to write that into the shapefile, but also create a new version in the GeoGig repository, right? So it asks me to define this new version. Like, how do you call this version, the change that I made? So I can say, edited, point, whatever. So right, this is what I've done. And you know, it's pretty transparent, it's quite seamless. I'm just doing normal QGIS work, right? And I can keep on doing that, adding more changes, etc. But whenever I want, I just can go back to my GeoGig navigator in here, right? And if I check my repo now, the history, you know, it has all the history in there, right? It has like, who has changed that? Like if you see it's me, I changed that 2 minutes ago, then I changed that again 1 minute ago. And you keep track of the whole history of that, right? This is just 2 changes. You can have thousands of them, or millions, depending on the time you spend on that. And then you can go back to any version anytime, like I can do, for instance. So I have created a branch at the first commit. That means it's like a parallel line of changes that starts at the beginning, right? And if you see, let me show you that. If I can just make, you know, this one in blue is the active branch, and I can go back to the other one. I'll make this branch the current branch. So I change to that branch as a current branch. And if you see the data changes, right? So I can go back to any version, switch from one branch to another, and it goes like that, right? So basically that's the idea. It's pretty simple to use. And then if you have other people using the same repo or the same data, right? Other people working on that, you can have a sync dialog, and I can sync with that. That means that if I enter here the URL where I have another version of this data set, I can just pull the data from there or push my data there so I can share with other people. It's pretty easy, right? I don't have any remote repo doing the same. There's no other people versioning this data because I just created that for the demo. But this is the idea, right? To change data and to keep track of the history. So anytime you can go back to any version and just use them, right? And then we have some tools for analysis that I'm not going to show, but you know, if you have the same data set at different stages, you can do analysis about how it has evolved, how it has changed first time, etc. So that's basically it. So this is a quick demo. If anyone wants to, you know, questions, I have a computer. I can make you a more detailed demo outside of the conference in here. And okay, thank you very much.
Спасибо за доклад.